What's up, design family, and welcome to another episode of Fit Design TV. On today's episode, we'll be looking at the top 5 sportswear mistakes that designers make when approaching sportswear. I know I made these mistakes myself, and I want to share my experience as a sportswear designer over the last 4 or 5 years on how I've acknowledged these mistakes and how I've overcome them. Hey guys, and welcome to Fit Design TV. So glad to have you here. On this channel, we discuss all things sports fashion, graphic design, manufacturing, and technology. We'll discuss key topics, answer pressing questions, and provide actionable steps on starting your own product line. If you're interested in any of the above topics, stick around. You're in for a good one. We'll look at these mistakes and we'll look at the implications of each of these mistakes, and hopefully by the end of this video you can walk away with a better idea of what mistakes you may or may not have been making and how to resolve it, and ultimately how to get better at designing amazing sportswear. Number one is using the wrong materials in the wrong places. I see this a lot on ladies' items. If we consider a pair of leggings, it's very common to panel them with mesh, gauze mesh, jersey mesh. We've done a video on meshes. I highly recommend you check it out. However, mesh can be a great accent fabric because of its durability, because of its ability to ventilate, and just in general for an aesthetic contrast sense. Let's look at gauze mesh, for example. Using gauze mesh in areas that are suitable to be used can be a great way to add a bit of intrigue, to add a bit of functionality to your garment. However, if you're using your mesh in the wrong places, you can end up with shear. Shear is essentially when the fabric starts to see through. Yes, your fabric is going to see through regardless, but shear can be a bigger problem in some places than the other. For example, if you have shear at the back of your calf, that's fine, because at the end of the day, you don't necessarily have anything that is more of a private or more of a personal issue over there. Using mesh in areas where you don't necessarily want it being see-through, such as around the hips, where you have your pantyline area, around the crotch, around the butt, all that can lead to issues down the line and issues with the wearer. You don't want people feeling uncomfortable wearing your designs, and you don't want to sacrifice comfort and privacy for the sake of an aesthetic look, right? At the end of the day, if you're adding mesh in places you shouldn't be adding mesh, you're not going to get a lot of people that are going to hop on that wagon. They don't want to wear that garment. So that's something that can be a major turnoff for most people. Please consider adding mesh in the appropriate places. I would never add mesh around the areas where they would be considered more private. The crotch area, the rear area, the hips, and anywhere where you not necessarily want shear. So bear in mind, mesh is a very aesthetic paneling kind of structure, and at the same time it can be functional. Use it for its functional and its aesthetic looks, but in the right places. In the same area, men's garments. Let's just say you're using the right type of fabric on a men's pair of joggers. However, when it comes to a gusset, you end up with a mesh that looks good but shears too much when stretched open. So you're going to end up with the same privacy issue. Or you're using a type of printed fabric that you've sublimated. And because you desperately want that pattern, you've gone ahead with 100% polyester sublimation print fabric. You're going to end up with the issue of not enough stretch on that. You may have a great fabric for the rest of the garment, however, that panel is incorrect. Because it doesn't have enough stretch, it ends up pulling on the rest of the fabric and creating rips and tears and generally uncomfortable experiences. Again, using the right material in the right place is key. Things that you should consider when using the material. What is the composition of my material? Does it match with the remainder of the fabrics that I've used in the same garment? For example, if you're dealing with a very matte fabric like cotton and you end up mixing it with a polyester, what you're going to end up with is a very mismatched look. Especially if those are tone on tone, what's going to happen is the polyester fabric is going to end up looking a lot shinier, and it's going to just throw off the entire design. You're going to lose that tone on tone look. So make sure that you're using the right materials in the right places, the right weights as well. You don't want a fabric that is super thick matched with a fabric that is super thin. You're going to end up again with that mix match, and essentially you're going to end up with a physical pull between the fabrics that's going to create issues in the final garment. So using the wrong materials in the wrong places can be super detrimental. Keep those ideas in mind and try to make the right decisions. Don't overthink it, but at the same time, give it some thought, because material mixing and matching is key, especially where you're going to use those materials. Number two is essentially using the wrong print or logo application on the wrong fabrics. What does that mean? It's all well and great to use a great heat transfer vinyl print logo on a nice polyester spandex t-shirt that's going to have stretch to it. However, using embroidery, though may sound like a good idea, right? Embroidery is super durable, can create some great detail in it, and it just looks luxurious overall. Using embroidery on a very, very stretchy fabric where you're going to get a lot of compression and you're going to get to wearing a quite tight fit. Let's look at like a pair of leggings made out of nylon spandex, and you end up with an embroidered logo. You're going to get a mismatch of tension. Because the embroidery logo is not going to stretch, it's going to pull against your garment. So what's going to happen is the rest of your garment is going to stretch, but your logo part isn't going to stretch. That's going to create undue stress and pressure around the embroidery area, which can lead to ripping. And this is something that I've experienced in the past, and I highly recommend you guys are very, very wary of it. I definitely don't recommend using embroidery on stretch fabrics, especially overly stretched fabrics. A nice polyester spandex tee, 95.5, or cotton spandex tee can use some embroidery on, but if you're going to be looking at more of a stretch fabric, you definitely want to avoid embroidery. The same is true for using screen printed logos on highly stretched fabrics like nylon spandex. Because screen printing hardens once it sets, you're going to end up with cracking over time and a lack of durability. Instead of using a traditional plastisol screen print, I recommend you use a silicone ink screen print. Silicone ink is applied the same way as squeegee through a screen, but the silicone is going to allow for stretch and a better fit over time. We see this on things like jacquard bands that are printed on as opposed to woven on, and because of that silicone in the print, you're going to end up with a much better durability over time. Number three is color blocking designs and materials. Color blocking is a great way to bring intrigue into your design and to ultimately create a more structured look to your garment. We see this on very futuristic looking brands, and what ends up happening is it's a great way to accentuate the different body parts. When I got into designing, especially for sportswear, I fell in love with blocking. I fell in love with calling out the different parts of the body and using panels and structures and seams to create a more structured and more of a masculine or more of a sporty look on my men's garments and more of a feminine look on my ladies' garments. Over time, I got better and better at flowing my lines, because what I would notice in the beginning is I was working in 2D, where a lot of beginner designers are working in 2D. They lack the knowledge and they lack the kind of perspective to be able to flow the lines from front to back. It can be easy to forget that there is a whole 360 world around us, and when we're dealing in front and back technical flats, it can be quite a daunting task to figure out how these panels wrap around the leg. What ends up happening is you end up with a patchwork style look where panels that start at the front don't meet at the back, and you end up having to create some sort of like mismatched look where the front and the back look highly disjointed. I definitely recommend you look into 3D modeling softwares. That's something that definitely got me into thinking about panels a lot more holistically, and it got me thinking about how I'm constructing my garments and where things are meeting. Make sure that if you're going to create a colored look, so if you're going to color block, you're not only going to create panels that avoiding that patchwork look is going to be a great way to create a more professional and polished design. I definitely don't like to see panels that don't meet from the front to the back correctly. You end up with this sort of mismatched or shifted look that sort of just looks like a mistake. And it is a mistake because you haven't thought of the entire flow of the panel from the front to the back. Look at programs like Clo3D, Marvelous Designer to really enhance your 3D skills and start thinking in 3D. It's a great way to translate 2D patterns into 3D designs. Because you'll be able to work in a 2D window, add your seams, and see instantly how they translate onto an avatar. It's a great way to start to get better and better. And if you still want to stick with sketching on pen and paper or using Procreate on an iPad to create your designs, at least you start to mentally work up an understanding of flow, geometry, and overall physics in the way that you're flowing your lines. Number 4 is the aesthetic over design. So for me, I see this a lot, especially in sportswear, because sportswear has become much more of a fashion statement for a lot of brands. You see a lot of brands getting to the higher and higher places of sportswear, charging more and more money, and they start to push the idea of aesthetics over the functionality. I see this a lot in ladies' sportswear. For example, straps for the sake of straps, straps that have no functionality to them, and they end up actually reducing the support of the garment. No one wants to wear a sports bra that isn't going to support you in the right way. At the end of the day, a sports bra is a functional garment. Yes, it can be beautiful, and yes, it can be well designed, but if you're using straps that aren't holding up correctly, and the wearer is consistently needing to raise everything up and make sure that there's not an issue of over cleavage being shown, this is one surefire way to lead people away from your brand and to stop them from buying time and time again. Sportswear should be function first, aesthetics later. The form should inform the function, and the function should inform the aesthetic. That's how all great things are designed, and I highly recommend you look at the functionality of your garment first and let that inform the aesthetic. Thin straps, bad materials, the wrong type of fit, all of that, when being pushed for an aesthetic purpose versus a functional purpose, can lead to a bad user experience. Please push the function of your garments first. Consider the end user, consider what they need out of this garment. If it's a sports bra, you need a lightweight material that's thick enough to prevent any support issues. You need a good structured, something that's not overly revealing, but at the same time, something that's not too constricting. If it's a nice pair of joggers, consider the end user again. What's the material? Where am I going to be using this? What climate? Does it need to be rainproof? Does it need to be insulating? So on and so forth. Consider these items first, and then let these key characteristics inform the rest of your design. Number 5 is using the right or the wrong type of fit on a specific garment type. What does that mean? We see this kind of push towards sportswear and these more relaxed fits. At the same time, we also see this push towards compression, more of an aesthetic or an athletic look, and trying to mix and match a certain type of garment with a certain type of fit for the idea of novelty is not always the right idea. Let's just say you have a ladies pullover hoodie, and a pullover hoodie is by nature meant to be a bit more relaxed, more oversized. It's built for comfort and warmth. It's not built to be skin tight, and it's not built for this super flexibility. It's meant to perform these key functions. If you're using, let's just say, cotton polyester blend, and you end up creating a very compressive design or compressive look to this pullover hoodie, what you're going to end up with is a generally uncomfortable user experience where the user can't move, they can't breathe, they feel overly constricted, and the pullover hoodie not only doesn't look good because the material doesn't match, but it doesn't function correctly because the user can't move. You've mixed a very compressive fit with a type of garment that's much more geared towards an outerwear look or an outerwear experience. So I hope that makes sense to you guys. There's obviously a lot more experiences that I can outline. If you guys want to hear more about them, feel free to leave it in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed the video, please consider smashing a thumbs up. It means the absolute world to us. If you guys enjoyed the video, also please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Fit Design TV. Until next time, stay awesome.